So, this is Michael Wolfblade doing a podcast. So yeah, um, podcast is, well, I don't know what the first one should be. This is going to be the first video on this channel, so I don't know what areas you guys are interested in, but I guess we can start. I guess podcasts are like either really, from my understanding, are really good informational talks, or just like opinionated talks that someone speaks and then everyone who's interested in it just listens to that topic. But why not for the first video we just go with the story? Because stories tend to make people happy. So yeah. Let's see what genre. Let's go with let's try and go with a funny story. I'm not sure if it'll be funny for everyone, but I want to try and do dark humor. And if it isn't funny for you, well then I guess we don't have compatible humors, and I'm sorry for that. I'll try and make some other things in there, but start it out. So, in our story, we have to have characters like all stories do. We have main character. Let's make it Little Toby. Little Toby. So, Little Toby, he and the other characters that will come up with throughout the story are. Let's see. Well, let's choose a time period now. Let's go with 19. Let's go a couple years before 1914. So we'll go 1912. This is Little Toby in 1912. He's an English man. Well, not man. He's a young man. Little Toby is, well, as we said, between the age of 14 and 15. Barely into his teenage years. Not exactly sure what the life expectancy be. Middle-aged. Don't more than two people. Two people take a while, especially if one's a young buck, really young buck. So they're making these ships, and they have, say, Brian has a work crew of 25 people. Various names. We aren't going to get into details with them yet until they become part of the main story. Toby is still going through some things. Well, he's he's living with the fact that his mother is dead, and it's not really cool. He, he an idea one day. He started thinking about everything that is affected when it comes to death. As he thinks about it, he realizes that there's more to this concept that he hasn't. I mean, this young guy, 14 years old right now, and she's already thinking about death. I mean, not necessarily thinking about the idea of death and the concept of it. He's starting to think more about it. He's starting to expand on that concept. And I'm not sure that this will play into the story a little bit later, but I'm not sure if microscopes were invented before then or not. I can't remember. I think in Asia they had like really ancient microscopes that were kind of like telescope looking things. I'm not sure if they were used as telescopes or microscopes or what they were used as. They were like a leaf with water on both ends and you could see farther. A little bit clearer. I'm not. Again, don't fact check me out. If you want to find out that, you can look it up yourself. But, so, we're starting to think of this concept of death. And let's just say, for our story's purpose, that microscopes are invented. I mean, they're really early, aren't like top-notch quality 27 lens scopes that we have today. They aren't anywhere near that. They're like one or two lenses, barely, not even really able to see a cell yet. But the idea that you can see things smaller with the concept of death starts rolling around in little Toby's head. And he starts thinking. He looks at the stars every night at the boat dock, because let's just say, for the story's purpose, that Brian and little Toby live at their place of work. Their lumberyard is, well, maybe they don't live at their place of work, but their house or their apartment or whatever they're living in, their townhouse, is catty corner or like right across the street from where his dad's business is. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you don't have to go far in the morning to do your job. But the idea of death and this idea of smaller things that we can't yet see, it's rolling around in Toby's head. And he just starts thinking about his mom, and he can't quite grasp everything that he's, learning. It's messing with him a little bit. He sees bits and pieces, and he doesn't know how to process it all. He's starting to get these pieces to a puzzle in which he has no idea what it's going to look like when it's finished. It's like all these secondhand pieces of this puzzle of just experiences he's gone through, and he's piecing them together one by one by one. And he's slowly starting to get this picture. And this picture is the concept of death and this other concept of things smaller that we can't really see. So he sits there and he just keeps rolling around it. Days go by, weeks go by. He starts, doing the daily routine as if it's just a routine. Like, he doesn't really think about it. He can go through it zombie-ish and still get everything his dad wants done. And on his days off, he doesn't really do much, but he sits around, he observes more. He starts looking at things in a more he changes his Crap, the word just left me. Okay, anyways, Toby's looking at things in a different light, so to speak. He's looking at things from a different angle. He's observing, analyzing, understanding, and processing far beyond most of his kids' age. He's beginning to get this concept that most people don't, like a lot of people his age don't really have much of an idea of. I mean, I'm not sure if this was around then, but I know in our culture today there are a ton of people out there that one thing goes wrong, and like you'll see 13, even younger than that, kids that shouldn't really, I mean, not necessarily should they not be on the internet, but they shouldn't necessarily be so connected to social media and things like that. But they are. And nowadays, you see, like, one thing goes wrong and they don't know what to do. And why is it when that happens that these kids go to the concept of death? Why is it that we have little Toby in 1912 having this idea roll over in his head after his mom's passing? Why is it that he's kind of in this like slum? It's kind of like slump type of thing, where he's kind of always bummed out. He doesn't really know what he's doing. There isn't really anything for this. No one really knows what it is. He's starting to process things that to him make sense, but to others are just ideas, fair weather ideas that don't really mean anything. Kind of like fair weather friends or acquaintances. You may know their name, you may remember their face for a week or two, but they don't really mean much to you. They aren't there when you need them most. And for Toby, he hasn't had this. He hasn't had these people to be there when his mom passed. So Toby, he has this idea rolling around his head of death and the concept of things smaller than an atom. Or maybe he is having the ideas of an atom. Maybe he's, thinking that there's something small, and he may not call it an atom, but, he's starting to get this slight understanding. Toby, well, if he's living in Britain at 1912 and he's already getting all this, then he obviously has had some education at his young age, which is wonderful and kind of superb. But even with all this education, it still doesn't make sense. And being as Britain is more of a Catholic kind of place. Catholic, and I'm not sure if at this time, like, Protestant stuff was starting up. I'm not, again, if you want to find out for yourself, I'm not exactly the most accurate history nut, but I have an idea of when things happen, so can't give you exact dates or when things happen unless it's something like the Constitution being signed or stuff like that, but you guys can look that up on yourself. We all have access to Google in this country, or we should, in one way, shape, or form. And if we don't, well, then there's always public libraries and things like that. So, if you want, do the research. It'll be worth your time, I guess, if you're into history. If you aren't into history, then don't sweat it. I mean, we are, in a way, repeating our past, but, we don't really do anything to stop ourselves from doing that. We just repeat it and continue. It's kind of like a cycle, and it's something that it's hard to, accept, but it happens. Anyways, back to the story with Toby. So we got Toby, and he's dealing with all this sudden, he's feeling. He's not, he knows he's human, sort of. Like, you ever seen those people around that, like, they look dead inside? And it's because they're feeling all these complex emotions that they have no idea how to process. They don't know what they're dealing with, how to deal with it, what they're feeling. They don't know. And it messes with them because they don't know. It's unknown. They're treading on unmarked territory. They are walking through a minefield with no reassurance that they won't blow up in the next 2 feet. And they don't know what to do. They're struggling. They're trying to win an uphill battle with toothpicks against, modern firearms. They're outnumbered outgunned. They don't stand much of a chance because they don't know what they're dealing with. And honestly, most of our society doesn't. We go through things constantly and we have no idea how to process it. Every time death happens in our society, one of two things typically happen. If you know the person that died, you may mourn. If you don't know the person that died, they were like an acquaintance or a fair weather friend, then it's no sweat off your back, but at the same time, you still have that. If you aren't a psychopath, you typically have that one thought or two thoughts in your mind of maybe things could have been different, or maybe I should have known this person a little bit better, or maybe their death didn't need to happen. And it's completely natural. These thoughts come and go, and it's all process of society. It's kind of how the cycle works, part of it. Because when there's a beginning, birth, there's always an end with death. And it's constantly cycling back. And if you think about it, life isn't exactly all we really make it out to be. In life, most people strive to get a lot of money, maybe do a lot of good, or try to do what they believe is good, make a difference, things like that. But, I mean, imagine something that we all use frequently today, that a lot of us use, that if you were to try and think of it right off the top of your head, you wouldn't remember the person who came up with it. Say headphones. I bet everyone watching this video, most people would not remember. You don't even know who invented the headphones, who came up with it, who came out with it first, what company bought out the idea, who potentially made millions and maybe donated some of that to like a charitable organization by the invention of headphones. No one really gets that. It doesn't really wrap around concept. I mean, you might know who invented headphones, like they were your great 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 grandfather or something like that. I'm not sure. I don't think headphones have been around for that many generations, but you never know. Unless they were like a family member or they're still alive or something, you don't really know them. I mean, how many people truly, like, off the top of their head, can remember, I don't know, the 27th president? I mean, you probably can remember, like, Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt. Actually, I think I may have... No, I don't think Teddy Roosevelt was just the 27th. But anyways, I remember, like, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Andrew Jackson, and that's maybe if you're a history nut. Other people will think about that and they'll hear those names and they'll be like, who? They'll ask questions like, who? What are they? Things like that. What did they do? When were they around? Things like that, because they don't know and they're curious. And it's a good thing to be curious. I mean, it's part of being human. In a way, we're kind of like cats. We have feline curiosity some of the time. I mean, some people don't want to admit to it, but you're almost always curious about things. Something in life you're going to be curious about. Unless, of course, you're a psychopath and you feel nothing. Then this podcast obviously isn't for you. But this whole idea of being curious about things and wanting to learn more or know more about things that we don't know, the unknown, that rolls back into our concept of death. And in a way, I was trying to slide it in there, but I'm not sure I did it too well. The concept of things smaller than an atom. I mean, it's possible. We see vacuums and microscopes between two atoms and two cells, things like that. There's just a space. It's kind of like an empty void. And in theory, you can constantly get smaller. You can just keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. I mean, there is no end to getting smaller. At the same time, there isn't any end to really getting bigger. If you think about it, the sky is the limit, and that saying is very true, because you can constantly go bigger, 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 bigger. And there's always, like, with our ingenuity as humans, we always find ways to keep going bigger, keep going better, upgrading, making things wider, more connected, things like that. And with the concept of death, And the idea of things being smaller than an atom, kind of like with Toby's story, well, it's an interesting one. Like, so if you have the concept of things being able to be smaller than an atom, like that little vacuum, now imagine the concept of death with that. I mean, we all have an end. Most races have a beginning and an end. Some, like the alligator, have survived for thousands of years. The turtles, thousands of years. Humans, we're barely getting close to 2,000, I think, if I remember correct. Maybe we've been around before. I think we're starting to gain on 3,000 years, but I again don't think whatever I say is automatically correct. I mean, I kind of want you guys to question what I'm saying, okay? But imagine the idea of death, the whole concept of death, of suddenly not being around anymore. I mean, we don't know what happens. What's at the other side of that bridge when we come to cross over it? What happens if we die of a natural death? Well, is it different than if we die of, say, a suicide, or if someone kills us, like in a homicide? If we were killed in a mass extinction type of thing, like either a genocide or a major natural event, like a volcano going off, or who knows? Are all those scenarios different? What happens when we cross that void? What is the darkness that we don't see? What is that idea? And then you have this idea of being smaller than an atom. And, well, things smaller than an atom. And if you think about it, look at the whole grand spectrum of things. I mean, if you're like me, and you're a druid, and you believe in this whole multi-realm idea, and if there's an infinite amount of realms, and there's the polar opposite realms of good and evil, but everything is shades of gray, really, I mean, you have your two polar opposites, but it's like a big circle, in a way. The polar opposites are on the sides of the circle. And that circle is composed of all the different shades of gray in which everything fits into, in one way or another. And yet it's all connected. It's kind of like an energy connects everything. Imagine the concept of death, where we don't know, it's the unknown, things like that. And then we go back to the concept of things smaller than an atom, the space between atoms. If you think about it, if you have any similar belief as me, like that, it's cool if you do, it's cool if you don't. I'm not going to judge anyone. I'm not going to try and bash on anyone's religion or anything. I've studied a lot of them, and then I made my choice. But that's not really my point. My point is, if you look at it from my perspective, from the whole grand spectrum thing, think about how many people we have. Think about all the different living creatures and living organisms and cells on this planet, all alone. And think about the ones that we found on, like, the moons around Jupiter, I think is where we found them, and things like that. And the whole grand spectrum of the universe, the whole concept of the universe, how big that is. Now imagine, in comparison, what our individual life is to the size of, say, the universe. If you think about it, it isn't that big, or it isn't, in comparison, our individual lives are smaller than the space between atoms. And in a way, I mean, think about it, our entire race, the human race, is maybe getting close to being the size of an atom, instead of just being the space, smaller than space. With the whole grand spectrum of things, I mean, if the two supervolcanoes in the world were to go off tomorrow and miraculously the apocalypse were to be upon us, and all the nuclear weapons in the world went off and no life was left, you got to think about this concept of death and the concept of being smaller than that atom. does any of it matter? I mean, it's a concept that I'm still wrapping my head around, and I'm still trying to learn and trying to understand, trying to put the pieces together like Toby was when his mother passed. I'm trying to assemble what the truth is for the universe, or at least the truth is for me. I mean, it could be different for everyone. My personal belief is every different religion out there is how that one energy I already went over presented itself to different people throughout different time periods, depending on what they needed and what they wanted to believe it. And if you think about it, it's completely logical that that is what created all these different things. I mean, if you think about it, don't you in some way feel connected to others, even if you don't know? Like, if you were to walk down a street, say, tomorrow, and you saw a 5-year-old boy who had scraped his knee badly. He was sitting there crying in the street. His bike was flipped. His tire might have been bent. And he had a bike wreck. He had his helmet on, but he still scraped his knee, and he's bawling. He doesn't know what to do. His leg hurts. He sees a lot of blood. He's only 5. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to get up off the ground and help himself. He's an innocent. He's having problems. And we all have problems in life. But right now he's having one. I mean, even if you had a bad day, some people out there, if they've had a bad day and they see that, they'll go with the typical mindset of, it's not my problem, it's someone else's. I don't, that isn't my kid, I don't need to help. He can handle it himself. You try not to care about the kid. You try not to be curious about what will happen next to that kid. And there are those people that would, when they see the kid, rush over and try and help. Present themselves in a friendly manner and say, hey, my name is such and such. I'm here to help because you're obviously having a bad day. Can you point me in the direction of your parents' house, or can you give me their phone number so I can call them and let you know you're here with a bloody knee, type of thing. And those are the kind of people that in our society and the societies of the world, really, are starting to lack. Our race is getting more bitter and more wrapped up with this illusion that we constantly chase that doesn't really matter. It won't bring back to that concept of being smaller than the space between atoms. What we do in our life doesn't really matter. I mean, there is no real point to continuing, but there is no real point to ending it. And you don't know what to do naturally because you've only lived to whatever age you are now. And you've never died. None of us have ever died and lived to tell the tale. It would be redonkulous. Understand what we don't understand. Try to make the pieces fit together when they obviously are not from the same puzzle. We've tried. They aren't. It's all. Everything is connected. We're all connected. Everything is connected. We have so much hate for and for no reason. We don't need it. It isn't healthy. It isn't good. It won't win you the lottery. It won't do anything positive for you. Because you gotta think about it. Even if you kill 1,000,000 people to get to where you are, if you become rich, you become the leader of like the ancient Rome, say, except in more modern era. Life is going good for you. But to get there you had to kill 1,000,000 innocent people. would it be worth it? I mean, you got to think about these. And this whole idea with how our country's going, and I know this is going to be touchy for people, but things like refugees and the problems the world is having right now, like world hunger, refugees, and problems in the Middle East with dictators and radical religionists that are supporting laws that were made for the Crusades. As far as I know, the laws in which ISIS use to, ratify what they do to people, what they do, all their suicide bombs, everything. The laws they made that, they're using that were an addition to the Quran were made during the Crusades when Europeans were invading their land, threatening their people, where the Europeans were influenced by the Pope to go to war in the Middle East for resources, money, glory. And they all did it in the name of God because they were tricked into doing it. Every single crusade pretty much is the same story, played over and over again. It's like it's stuck on repeat. And yet, back and to do what they don't want to do, and not to want to do it. I mean, yeah, they may not sleeper cells, and the fact that some of the refugees have created things like rape squads and kill squads in nations like Sweden, things like that, where they're killing and hurting innocent people because the nation they went to won't assimilate to the way they were. If that made any sense. The refugees come to, say, Sweden. The Sweden government doesn't assimilate to be more like the Middle East. And so they create kill squads and things like that. And they go around. They think what they're doing is a good cause by killing and raping innocent people. And it's all because of perspective and mindsets and the fact that we all, as a human race, have a lot of anger and spite for those that are slightly different from us. I mean, if you think about it, all of our DNA is like 99.9 or 8% the same about it. We're all human. We all bleed. We all can die. We all are born. We all believe in what we believe, and currently most of the world is, put it bluntly, has their head shoved up their own asshole. They aren't being open-minded and to adapt to the world around them. They're being stuck in their own ways. They're being selfish. They're being the big school, that big school bully that beat on all the, younger kids and things like that because they were bigger and they could do so. Because they had problems at home that they wanted to solve. They couldn't process things. Because they're being bullied themselves. Maybe they're being bullied because their parent just died and they don't know how to process things because they're stuck around this concept of death. The concept of death, and that's really all that there is. Our lives being smaller in comparison to the grand scheme of things, and the space between atoms, then why do we have so much time, apparently, to just waste our life that isn't really meaningless anyways? To be angry, inspired, and vengeful, and so stubborn. I don't know why our society is like this, and it makes no sense. I mean, if we're all people, we all can survive. We all have unique traits, yes, but we all are human. And yet we separate ourselves into different races. when we're all part of the same fucking race. Think about it. The person from Africa, they're human. The person from Norway, they're human. The person from the Middle East, they're human. The person from China, they're human. The person from Canada, they're human. The person from Brazil, they're human. The person from Mexico is human too. But you see, because we're all spiteful and pig-headed and stubborn, angry with each other. Anger is what we use to fill the void of fear. And really, we're afraid of deal with it. We don't know what we need to do. We are again they don't work. It doesn't. They don't fit together. They're not the same puzzle. Yeah, we're trying to make it work. We're trying to make it all black and white when really it's all nothing but a big shitty gray. Every race, every race is evil. We're all the same race. We have so much good potential in us, but we're doing so bad. We are destroying ourselves. We are our own worst enemies. We are our own demons. And whether we want to believe it or not, we will be our own downfall. And that's exactly. Although, or stubborn capitalist pigs that make more. But that isn't the case for everything. Anything. A very few percentage of people are that way. And even in our own, we're called the United States for a reason. But it's like we're constantly at war with ourselves. We aren't trying to bomb us like, you know, or stop doing what happened. Been up to date what's going on in Syria. But our nation helps fuel that anger and spite. Making us so pissed off for war, willing to spike. The bike rack. That America. You know, Mexican, you were from maybe a language barrier between the two. But the for violence, rape, anything really. I mean, all it constitutes for is an opportunity to learn, to gain more patience, to be more wise. I mean, a smart man learns from his own. A wise man learns from others. And quite frankly, most of the world isn't learning from either. We are neither being wise or smart. We are, again, destroying ourselves. Civilizations are crumbling. Our world is on the brink of war. All because we can't get it through our thick heads that we're all human, that we all suffer, that we all have problems, that our individual needs and wants and everything don't really matter, and that all we really can do in this life is try and help others. And you see, that's what gets us. We don't try to learn. We don't try to better ourselves. We don't try to help others. We aren't doing a lot of that right now, and we haven't been. I mean, we've done it here and there. There have been small organizations, but for every gun thing that happens, 10 things negative get posted on the news, and they don't even give you the actual facts. Think about it. They don't tell you. They may tell you how. That's only once they tell you how many ones. And they go on say so many. One. Because if they're a Polish, they support their home country, Poland. And if they're supporting Poland, marching in the streets for Poland, they aren't marching against Poland. It makes no fucking sense. Why would nationals be against the country that supports them? Don't. There. What do you do? Toby. Working on this boat. Toby, good. And he learns to be at peace with it. And with that peace, he learns to love. He learns to accept others for who they are and how to accept going to other places without trying to make the place you went to simulate the way you left. Like, to the methods and cultures of what you left. Learn to go with the flow, accept multiple part of be hardcore loyal to one, even if they're in the wrong. So the job though is no one really know. He didn't much. How much quality of life for everyone. People would be treated as equal and respect given to everyone. I mean, the same 13 points as it is in America, but the idea is the same. The idea is if the world could work on building and strengthening these 13 points I'm about to list to you before I end this video, and understand the concept that Toby, at the age of 14 and a half, understood, then the world would be an amazing. It wouldn't just be beautiful to biologists at that point. It would be beautiful to everyone. You would understand everything. I mean, the best way to understand try and find out what makes everyone different and what makes everyone find out how everyone thinks. We don't in my lifetime. I know that. I mean, we don't have the technology for that, and we can't make anything accurate without being biased in one way, shape, or form. But that's the only way to truly understand. And until then, it's just best to go with the flow, to be kind and nice, and to be the best person you can, because you never know what the other person. In their helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. The 13th can be anything. I've seen troops and adventure crews that add things like flexible or accepting, or honorable. They add a lot of. The idea is that those 13 points, the meaning stays the same. If the world can just work on it, it'd be such a better environment. We'd start working at fixing the problems our world has instead of fighting each other tooth and nail. We'd learn to love. We'd learn to accept it. We'd learn to embrace those that are struggling, and we'd learn to help those that need it. That's all I have for this podcast. This is Michael Wolfblade signing out. Bye.